This next segment now, we will introduce you to our Utah Monetary Summit partners, Larry Hilton, Representative Brad Galvez, who have worked tirelessly, really in the past 2 years, to pass Utah's Legal Tender Act. Larry is the founder of Utah Precious Metals Association, and they will introduce our guests, national speakers Kevin Freeman, Tom Selgas, and Victor Sperandeo.
First of all, let me just say thank you for being here today. I know there's a lot of things that you could be doing on a Saturday, but to be here is a sacrifice. But I do believe that you'll be well rewarded for it. So thank you for being here, and thank you to once again to Bert and Kathy Smith. I think it's appropriate that that we're here today as part of this this Freedoms Conference. About a year ago, after we passed the Utah Legal Tender Act, Bert Smith was featured in a New York Times article. And the reason he was featured in that New York Times article is because back in the late 70s, early 80s, Bert was accepting silver, and still does today, accepting silver in his store for merchandise. And so he was featured in that article because Bert had the vision many years ago what sound money was all about, and continues to have that vision and that passion. So once again, thank you for being here, and it's appropriate that sound money is part of this great Freedom Conference today. I won't take long, but I do want to maybe just give you a brief synopsis or summary of why we're here today and what sound money is all about. Approximately, probably 3 or 4 years ago, my wife was working as a legislative assistant on Capitol Hill. And I remember she came home and she talked about a presentation that she sat in one of the committee meetings, and talked about the presentation and talked about the sound money principles that was discussed in that committee meeting. And as it just so happens, approximately a year, 2 years later, I was elected to the House of Representatives, and had the opportunity of being able to be the sponsor of legislation, the Utah Legal Tender Act. It was House Bill 317. And Larry Hilton, who I'll introduce here in a second, was kind of the brainchild of that. Larry came to me with a bill that was fairly long, and we scaled it back significantly in order to allow the bill to move forward and to pass. And we did some great things, I think, in that session. House Bill 317 did 4 significant things. First of all, it reiterated the fact that in Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, so if you look in your pamphlet there, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, you will find one of the express rights that are afforded to the states, and that's to make gold and silver coin legal tender for the payment of debt. So that's what we did in the state of Utah. We reiterated that fact that we in Utah believe that gold and silver coin is legal tender for the payment of debt. We exempted it from capital gains tax, which was a significant step, because if you tax money, obviously, just by the very nature of doing so, you demonetize it, and so that was an important part. We made it voluntary, not mandatory, so it allows people to choose, to say, okay, well, yes, we want to use this, or no, we don't want to use this, and that was an important fact. And the fourth thing, it required our Revenue and Taxation Committee to study it a little bit. This past session, 2012, House Bill 157, we made some modifications to it. We expanded it and made it a little broader, and made it so that it is a little more functioning. We'll talk in our workshops this afternoon about kind of where we're going with that, and I think that's important to understand. Is in the bill itself, we basically set up the framework for legal tender as gold and silver coin to work in the state of Utah, but we still have some steps to take. We still have the private sector that needs to get on board and to implement and put in process the system to make that work, and I think we have a good start on that. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. It was interesting. I just got a phone call a couple of days ago from a reporter. He called and says, I'd like to come up and interview and talk a little bit about your thoughts on QE3. If everybody's familiar with QE3, quantitative easement third, well, there's no limit. Basically, what they've done now is just said, okay, we're writing a blank check, and oh, by the way, when we get done with this, what's going to happen is the money that you have today is going to be worth a lot less than what you had when we started that process. And so it was interesting to kind of be able to chance to talk about that. I believe with sound money, what we're doing is we're creating prosperity. We're not printing more money, and I think that's a significant step that we're doing here. Voltaire said, eventually fiat or paper money always returns back to its original value, which is zero. So let me just introduce Larry Hilton. I have briefly. Larry is a local attorney, runs an insurance office. Larry, as I mentioned, was kind of the brainchild, at least the instigator of getting the sound money movement going in the state of Utah. And he's very passionate about it, as you'll see, and has been a great defender and promoter of this sound money principle, not only here in the state, but throughout the country. And we're good to have him on board. The format we'll take now is we'll have each individual that will be presenting this afternoon will have an opportunity to take about 5 minutes, kind of introduce their topic or their theme for the workshop. Following those introductions, we will then take about the remaining probably about 20-25 minutes, and we'll have a little panel discussion and maybe a chance to answer a few questions pertaining to sound money. So Larry?
Thank you, Brad. Representative Galvez is really one of my personal heroes. He and his colleagues have given to Utah something that was envisioned by the founders, really when this nation was born, and that is a sound monetary system. And that really is what put the United States on the world map, is a dollar that was as good as gold. And so what we're trying to do is move back in that direction. You know, I want to also say thanks to Kathy and Bert for hosting this. Last year we had the Utah Monetary Summit just down the way here in the Officers Club. And I know what an undertaking it is to put something like this together. So if we can just please give them thank you so much. I've got my own story about Bert Smith, so maybe I'll kind of put him on the spot for a moment. You know, we were up, Brad mentioned that we had this year House Bill 157. The governor came up actually to Smith and Edwards for the ceremonial signing of that bill. And as I drove up there, I saw there was this sign that says declaring war on big city prices. So I went in there and I said, well, let me just see really how cheap, you know, I could get something for. So I went in, and this cool pocket knife caught my attention. It was prominently displayed there, beautiful display, and I thought, I wonder how much I could get that for. I went over to Bert and said, you know, I understand you have pretty good prices here. Would you sell this for a dime? I pulled a dime out of my pocket and handed it to him, and he looked at it and he said, for that dime, you bet, you got a deal. So one dime, one pocket knife. The secret is this is a silver dime. It's a pre-1964 dime, and that's what made the difference. If you look back in time at the monetary system that we enjoyed, that our parents and grandparents enjoyed, and beyond that, our money, dimes and quarters and so forth like that, held their purchasing power. Oh, for 173 years, the cost of an ounce of silver was exactly $1.29, because that was the definition of a dollar. Times have changed, but we're trying to look back at the forward thinking that our founding fathers had. I just would like to say a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today in our breakout session. Our topic, Brad and I will be addressing, is called choice in currency. And I would suggest that the concept of choice in currency is actually hard-coded into the Constitution of the United States. And specifically what we're going to talk about is how the founders made the states guardians of sound money. It specifically states in Article 1, Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender for payment of debts. And that's what's been done here in Utah. For the first time in over 100 years, the Utah legislature has stepped forward and said, you know what, we're going to follow the Constitution. It's a pretty good blueprint, and that's what we want to do. So because of the good work of Brad Galvez and his colleagues in the legislature, we now have in Utah a legal framework for a true choice in currency, for a sound money option for Utahns. That's great, That is, well, thank you. You got to have that. But the other thing that we need to really make choice and currency a reality is we need you. We need all of you to say, you know what, I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to actually use sound money. And so that's what we're going to talk about in today's conference. Larry Parks, one of our presenters, who isn't here, he'll be coming in virtually. He will be speaking to us from New York, and he's going to talk about concrete things that you can do with your own finances to take a step towards sound money. In the session that we're going to do, we'll talk specifically about things that are going on here in Utah and what can be done for each of you to actually use sound money to buy your groceries, to pay your gas bills, to actually use it in your day-to-day lives. Because that's when you release the liberty and the prosperity power of sound money. Just one last story on Bert. You know, the silver sale that he had years ago that Brad alluded to. He told me that he had people coming in that were just, you know, giddy at the prospect of buying goods for, you know, for a quarter. One gentleman, he said, showed up several times through the day with a different grandchild each time, saying, hey, look, this is what we used to do. When I was a kid, I can go and I could buy this for a quarter, literally, and we're going to do it again because, you know, Bert's bringing back real money. And so I applaud him for that effort, and now that's available to all of us. Also in our session, we will have a special guest who's flown in from California. This is a man who decades ago decided that he was going to live the sound money life. He was going to live exclusively using gold and silver coin as his medium of exchange. You're not going to want to miss his story. It is compelling and it's inspiring. And so with that, I will turn the time back to Brad.
Let me now introduce Kevin Freeman. Kevin is an economic warfare specialist and New York Times best-selling author of Secret Weapon. I know there's many of you in here that probably have read his book, a great book. Kevin was commissioned by the Department of Defense to study economic warfare. Kevin briefed the FBI, the CIA, DIA, members of Congress, and the Senate with his research report on external causes titled Economic Warfare, Risks and Responses. As a co-founder and chairman of the Adam Smith Foundation, Kevin has helped promote entrepreneurship and investment education on college campuses. Their Adam Smith Award for Individual Excellence in Free Enterprise has been presented to Sir John Marks Templeton, President Ronald Reagan, William F. Buckley Jr., Dave Thomas, Steve Forbes, and William E. Simon, among others. So, Kevin, good to have you with us today.
I am glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to come to Utah. It's a great state, and the things that you're doing with the sound money are just incredible. I'm from Texas, and we have elected we're in process of electing a great new legislature that understands some of the things behind the sound money concept, and we've got a new program called Defend Texas, and we hope to be following in your suit and creating our own sound money here in the state of Texas. Now, I have to warn you that when I came in this morning, I looked at my email. I got an email from Glenn Beck, you know, the blaze.com emails, that was telling about this radical, horrible conference that's happening at the University of Utah today. No, I'm not kidding. And it said, don't go to this. It wasn't this conference, actually. I was glad to find out that I'm not at the Sextravaganza conference that's being held on campus by secular humanists, atheists, and promoters of sexuality. But the battleground is going on. That's the difference, isn't it, between liberty and freedom. We're celebrating liberty here, and on this same campus this afternoon, they will be celebrating godless freedom. And I'm really, actually, it just struck me so hard to hear that. I also, as everyone else, want to thank Bert and Kathy Smith. I brought to Bert and Kathy $100 trillion from the Federal Bank of Zimbabwe, $50 trillion each. so that they can cover the cost of the conference, pay off the national debt, and have a little change left over. So I'll bring these to you. I thank you. I'm going to cover 4 points today. One, we're in the midst of a global economic war. Not only is our government doing everything possible to destroy America and destroy our currency, but Al-Qaeda, Hugo Chavez, the Iranians, elements in China, and elements in Russia have targeted our economy and have the intention of turning a $100 bill into one of these. The second point I'll make is that everything that we're facing that has accelerated since 2008, 4 years ago this week, everything's accelerated. And the reason it accelerated is there was an attack on our economy by elements in the Middle East in 2008, the week of September 11th, that has ushered in the election of President Obama and ushered in individuals who were willing to give up their liberty for a little bit of that protection. Take care of us. And all of the welfare, all of the everything that we've seen began as a premeditated, planned economic attack on our nation. And it's accelerated because these trends were already in place. They have just massively accelerated the past 4 years. That's the second point. The third point I'll make is the next attack is coming, and it will be much, much worse. Utah has some layer of protection now because of the institution of sound money. But the next attack is planned to destroy the U.S. dollar. And it may have started this week. We saw Russia and China join together that they're going to exchange oil for yuan, no longer using the dollar. We've seen so many things happening and accelerating. The planned intention is to make the dollar worthless on global currency markets. Now, the same thing happened this week internally. Ben Bernanke said, we're going to print all the money that we need. If we're running a $16 trillion debt, which we have, and $1 trillion plus a year in new deficit, who's going to buy that debt? If the foreigners will no longer purchase it, the Russians, the Chinese, and others, stop buying U.S. debt and the dollar, the only solution is the Federal Reserve will have to print money. That's what Zimbabwe did in 2008. That's why this is worth nothing. So and it's not just you think, well, that's a third world country, it's not a big country. Here is 1 million Mark from 1923 Germany. The Germans tried that too. So we're on a path of destruction for the dollar. It has enormous implications for all sorts of things. Now, the good news is, the fourth point that I'll make is we have things we can do about it. And this conference has already mentioned several of them. We need to promote liberty. How do we do that? First, we've got to get our budget under control. We've got to stop spending $1 trillion more than we're bringing in. We spend $400 million an hour at the federal level. $150 million an hour of that is borrowed money. We've got to stop that and get that under control. The second thing we need to do is we need to free our federal lands. There is so much oil and so much natural gas in this country that if we did that, we could defund the terrorists and make us a very, very wealthy nation. So taking control of the lands, putting it in private hands, developing our own natural resources, and we need to alter our tax policy. Right now, there's almost $2 trillion of American corporate money that was earned overseas that is kept overseas. So when their iPhones sold in Asia, Apple won't bring that money back to the United States because we want to have confiscatory tax policies, and we want to take, so they say, well, leave it there. John Chambers of Cisco has said, I've got $50 billion I will put to work in America, hiring Americans, building things, and building our economy if you'll just change the tax laws. And the federal government says no. We've got to change our tax policy. And the last thing that we need to do is we need to remove regulations that are absolutely ridiculous, that are preventing small business from building and growing and creating. I had the honor of meeting President Reagan once in my life. I met him when I gave him the Adam Smith Award. It was in the year 1992, I believe. And we said, thank you, Mr. President, for all that you've done. And he looked, and I had Charlton Heston by my side. So I had Moses with me giving an award to President Reagan. And he said, I didn't do anything other than get government, and excuse the language, get government the hell out of the way so the American people could be themselves. My job and why I wrote the book Secret Weapon, and Glenn Beck, if you don't want to buy the book, I think Bert and Kathy have it for sale. If you don't want to buy the book, you can download a chapter 4 from Glenn Beck's book, Cowards, free. You go to glennbeck.com/cowards, and chapter 4 is all about economic warfare. What I've done is take this economic issue and put it in a national security context. And the reason that I did that is if we don't solve the economic problem, our national security is gone. And that is the intention of our enemies. And by putting it in a national security context, my hope is that the leadership of this country, which is you, by the way, you are the leadership of this country. We don't all belong to government. Government does belong to us, contrary to what the Democratic Party has told us. You are the leadership. If I can educate the leadership of this country sufficiently to realize that this is a serious national security crisis, then hopefully you will demand your servants in Washington to be accountable and turn this nation back to sound constitutional biblical principles. So with that, I hope you'll come to the workshop this afternoon, and I'll cover these things in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll let you know, I spent about 45 minutes this past week with one of your well, not your interns, but an intern from one of your representatives in the House of Texas, and we talked about sound money and talked about some of the principles and some of the things that they can do in Texas to implement some of the things that we've done here in Utah. So I look forward to some of that coming to fruition. Let me introduce next Tom Selgas. Tom is a CEO and constitutional lawful money advisor. Tom is recognized as one of the nation's leading constitutional and legal experts in the field of lawful money of the United States of America. Several states and subcommittees have, including, we use Tom somewhat, in getting his opinion and ideas and testifying and educating officials on this lawful and constitutional sound money principles. Tom has had the privilege to work with the late General Alexander Haig, former Secretary of the State under Ronald Reagan. So join with me in welcoming Tom Selgas.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to start off by first saying that now I really know the truth that behind every great man is a great woman. Lisa, thank you for educating your husband and listening so attentively on the lawful money or sound money issue when you were working in the House. And Brad, thank you for taking it forward. And Burton and Kathy, thank you for this conference, and thank you for your life dedicated to freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness that comes from that in this country. With that, my discussion today is going to focus on lawful money and gold clause contracts and how to use them. Today in the United States, I got 3 units here, all to most people, well, maybe you've all seen this one marked as $1. Many of you may or may not have seen this one also called $1. And very few of you have probably seen this one called $1. The issue is that only in the law is this one described as $1. In the law, this is a legal tender redeemable for $1, and this is not even described as $1 in the law. It's defined as a dollar. And we're going to look at the difference of those 3 and how to write a contract in a manner that says that you're entitled to this $1, which is the official lawful money of the United States. And this is what our founders used in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution and in the 7th Amendment, when the specific word dollar was used. The term dollar isn't defined in the Constitution itself. The term dollar was understood by everybody to be a weight of silver. It's like the term year. Everyone understood that the term year was one revolution of the earth around the sun. We happen to classify that today as approximately 365 days, and I'll say approximately because, you know, every 4 years we have a leap year, and on the century mark we skip that, etc. But it's actually one revolution of the sun around, I mean, one revolution of the Earth around the sun. If Congress tomorrow said, we're going to now change the definition of the year to be 10 revolutions of the Earth around the sun, we'd have Obama for 36 more of today's years than we would tomorrow. How would you all like that? Well, that is the effect of inflation. We have let the government and the powers that be redefine the term such that they get the benefit of our labor by devaluing this currency as we go through time. So that's my discussion today. I hope you join me. I forget what time it is, but I'm in the furthest room down the hall, and I look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you, Tom. Tom has been, as shown, a proponent of this. In fact, he actually has, how many lost cases are pending? He has a number of them that he's been testing, if you will, the courts to see how the courts will stand on some of these issues, and so we look forward to that happening. Let me introduce now Victor Sperandeo. Victor is President and CEO of Alpha Financial Technologies. He's a professional trader with over 40 years of experience on Wall Street. And Victor, because of his expertise and his experience, was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Traders Hall of Fame. Victor has a great experience on the U.S. debt and what's happening with the debt and how it impacts you as individuals, as investors, and as citizens of the United States. So, Victor, welcome, and we'll give you a few minutes.
Thank you all, and thank you to Kathy. I spoke to you yesterday. Where is Kathy? Is it you? Okay, missed you at the airport, but I appreciate you all inviting me. Tom Selgas was responsible probably for having my name mentioned. I'm here for a couple of reasons. First and foremost is to congratulate Utah to at least have, let's say, formalized what is in the Constitution to not tax money. Taxing money is so such an anathema to my way of thinking, if I read the constitutionally word for word, that to tax gold, as the U.S. federal government does, and now the state of Utah at least has eliminated capital gains tax on the appreciation of gold, because as you devalue the paper currency, gold appreciates, as you've seen, and to tax what the Constitution, and only the Constitution, says that gold and silver coin is money, is just wrong to me. Now, I appreciate the United States because if it wasn't for the freedoms when I was growing up, I would probably be putting bumpers on cars in Poland or someplace. So I really appreciate the country for what it was supposed to be, and it was a land of opportunity. It wasn't a land of guaranteeing anything. Constitution doesn't guarantee that you shouldn't be stupid if that's what you want to be. But the point is, it does guarantee freedoms. Now, I have to state this. I don't know if it's been stated before, but the Constitution is not the same. In 1913, it was radically changed from the implementation of the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve Board. So what my talk is, every year as part of my job, and if you've ever heard of my books, you know, books are all over the world, so I'm pretty well known for being an Austrian school libertarian / objectivist kind of guy. It is my job to read the CBO report, comes out the end of January, and it's put out by the Congressional Budget Office, and it makes projections for 10 years on certain assumptions, taxes, spending, interest rates, inflation rates, and deficits. Now, in reading that in 2010, now that was the first year after Obama was officially in office, and the projections were outrageous. They were corrupt is the only word I can think of. They were not possible. So I made this speech that I'm giving today, which I've updated and changed, and it was a warning. And it was basically, the title of the speech is Hyperinflation, a Statistical Inevitability. And as I was writing this, the process that I gave this speech in February 2010, and basically said that if things don't change, hyperinflation, which by the way is the worst scenario in the world, the Zimbabwe $1 trillion note is witness that, you know, I want to define it. There was an economist in the 50s, 1956. His name was Kagan, Phil Kagan, I think. I may be wrong on the first name. Wrote a book on quantitative theory of money. Milton Friedman wrote the foreword. And basically, he defined hyperinflation, which is stuck today with every professor and economic person worthy of their salt uses this. It is a 50% depreciation of your money, or i.e. an increase in the CPI, if you want to relate it to our measure generally of inflation, in 1 month, 50%. So think about you having, let's use a round number of $1 million in the bank, and you've got it in a bank CD, let's say, and all of a sudden, in 1 month, it's now worth $500,000. And by the way, it never comes back. In every occasion in history, there are 30 of them. There are 57 if you count the same occasions differently. Once this happens, you've lost the money forever, and they go to zero. Now, some countries devalue their currency. Roughly 450 countries have devalued their way down without hyperinflation, and over 10 years, 75% is the definition, and they just disappear. So what my speech is about is about now you are virtually there on, and what happened with Ben Bernanke with QE3 last week is a deep promotion of the fact you're headed to hyperinflation. Now, I'm going to define how that works, why it works. The problem is timing. I can't tell you the date. That's my business, by the way, but I can't tell you that because it's a psychological phenomenon. In other words, when people reject the currency and stop using it and buying debt in this case, the Fed prints it. So that's what basically comes about. In other words, you usually get to hyperinflation from getting a deflationary recession, depression-like scenario first. And the debt has to be, if you will, refinanced. And the debt holders realize they're never going to get their money, so they stop buying it. And who's left to buy it is the Federal Reserve Board. That's what's beginning today. So anyway, I hope to see some of you later. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, we have some wonderful, wonderful presenters for our workshops this afternoon, and we hope that if you'll take the opportunity to pick some of them and attend and learn more about the sound money and where we're going as a state and where we're going as a nation. I think it's important for you to understand. What we'd like to do now is take the last remaining time that we have and do a little panel discussion. Just how much time do we have on timekeepers, just so we know? About 18 minutes. Okay, so we'll take the next 18 minutes. We've asked Larry Hilton to kind of be the moderator of the panel discussion, so we'll turn some time over to Larry.
All right, we want to make this very informative for you. We have a panel of experts up here on monetary policy issues, monetary reform. I've got just a couple of questions that I've put down to kind of get the ball rolling, but any of you that have questions that you'd like to pose and get a few different takes on it, please start thinking of those. All right, so our first question is to the panel, and I'll just kind of open it up to see who wants to jump in on this, is what is your personal definition of sound money? Your personal definition of sound money. Do we have a taker on that? Okay. Tom, you want to jump in on that one?
sound money is a commodity-based money that has enough capital input into it, meaning the cost of money will always end up being its cost of production. The cost to produce an ounce of gold is very high, and its shelf life is basically eternity, minus what God defines as eternity. But as long as the earth is here, basically. And so what happens is the unit of work is preserved because A, the shelf life doesn't depreciate, B, the scarcity is part of the cost of production there is high enough that it can't just be reproduced. And C is the portability of that money will allow, in terms of gold, just think of how fine you can get gold. You can get it down into the micrograins. And so that allows at different units. In today's world, if you would like all the conveniences of electronic, what you'd love to have, or electronic uses of your devices, is you'd like to have a solid piece of gold sitting in, I'll say, the Utah Treasury. And the Utah Treasury is the bank for that for you. So it's guaranteed and it's not run by some huckster. But the state has an actual duty to protect its citizens. That electronic currency can then take, if you had 1 troy ounce is 480 grains, you could take subparts of that to use in your transaction. So if you priced your units in gold, for instance, you can take tiny micrograms of gold and use them, and that has a particular value because of its scarcity and because of the cost of production. On the other hand, these notes, which are disappearing rather quickly, and if you look at the reports that Victor was talking about, these paper notes are really a fraction of the electronic currency that exists. The electronic currency takes a billionth of a cent because all they do to create a factor of 10 times the more currency is they push another 0, and now I got 10 times more currency than I had before on a computer. And that's basically what happens today. So the cost is near 0. And so therefore, the value of this will approach its cost of production, which is near 0, versus silver or gold, which has a higher cost of production and has scarce availability that won't allow somebody to reproduce it quickly.
Excellent response. Thank you. Let me just do kind of a little twist on that question and kind of throw it over to this side of the table, see if we can get some thoughts there. How does the behavior of sound money in the economy differ from unsound money? What kinds of things can you expect from sound money as a participant in a market economy that you would not expect from unsound money? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I would add to the definition of sound money the psychological component that was mentioned. Is this mic on? Can you hear me?
There you go, just a
Okay.
little closer.
I would add to the definition of sound money the psychological component, because sound money is money that has the ability to maintain its exchange value over time, and that's why a paper dollar doesn't have the ability, because if people lose confidence in it, it falls apart. In terms of what I study, the difference between sound money and unsound money, if our economy was built on a sound money basis that had permanence, there could be no foreign attack of it. You couldn't have, as a foreign nation, say, we're going to destroy the value of your sound money. It wouldn't be possible because it would maintain its relevance regardless. So to me, the functioning in the economy, the differential between sound money and unsound money, the primary difference from my perspective is that using the unsound money opens us up to acts of foreign terrorism, allows our enemies to attack us and to destroy our system and our way of life.
All right, just to get to your question, Larry.
Yes.
It is Larry, okay.
Brad's here, Larry's here.
It's a different analysis, all right. But the key here is you all have an intuitive knowledge of what counterfeiting is, right? You take the US dollar, paper dollar, and you try to reproduce it, only they use hundreds generally, or 50s or 20s. And you basically, if you can do that and make it look semi the same, when you go out to buy things, you get the benefit of the lowest prices. And then as people start to realize that the objects going off their shelf because of this counterfeiting is not real, they start to raise the prices. But you got the first benefit. Now, when you have sound money such as gold, and I did this work personally, and it comes out of documents, books by the United States government, from 1776 to 1913, inflation in the United States was about 12 basis points a year. That's the exact number. So that's 1/8 of 1% a year. With 1913 to date, it's 3.23% compounded in be 100 years. Now, you may not think that now, by the way, the 3.23 is really a bit of a curveball because when we went officially off the gold standard in 1971, internationally, when Nixon did his ending of the gold standard, from that date to now, you have a 4.25% compounded inflation rate. So it was about 2.3 till 71, and then 4.25, and over the whole period, it's 3.23. Now, if you want to know, and I'm answering a little bit more here, but why the middle class, whoever the middle class is suffering, you try to think that can you get a 4.25% raise just to keep up with what inflation is per year, and then you have to pay taxes on that. So you're not getting the whole 4.25%. You got state, city, and federal government taxes. So you could see where the twist of how sound money versus the phony money, the counterfeit money, will affect the economy. You are continuously paying increased prices of things. And all those things are being eroded by the paper money that's being printed electronically and through chopping down trees. So that's the answer I would give.
Yeah, excellent. Did you have a thought on that? Thank you. I think that really puts a lot of perspective on that. For me, and what I've kind of heard here is sound money is something that would retain its value over time. You know, go back 2,000 years, a Roman senator could buy a nice suit of clothes for an ounce of gold. Same thing applies in Washington today. It's maintained its value over 2,000 years. And I think another maybe subset of sound money would be what we would call natural money, that which without any government interference whatsoever or direction or regulation actually becomes the medium of exchange, the most trusted medium of exchange. Okay, our next question is what's a dollar? But you know, I think that Tom's going to get into that one, so maybe we'll move on to the next one. This one is, what is the theory and reality behind quantitative easing? Now, obviously, there's a lot of people in this country that feel like the QE cycles that we're going through is supposed to be a means to an end. It's supposed to have some beneficial effect. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about, you know, what's the theory behind it, who came up with this theory, and what's the reality that we're actually experiencing. Who wants to jump into that one? You want to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, since I'm in Wall Street and I make bets on this every day, well, every time they do it, I might as well give you my perspective on this. First, well, all right, QE is thought of by the federal government as being an extension. I mean, this is their excuse. I'll tell you the flaw. They look at it that when the Fed executes monetary policy, which what it used to do primarily is buy 90-day Treasury bills, and they would put money in the system, and that would lower interest rates. And that was used as a stimulus or a control of the economy. So the Fed would stimulate the way they use the word stimulate, which is to lower interest rates, which was a signal to business to go ahead and basically if you will, go ahead and hire people and build plants and produce things. Now, buying a 90-day Treasury bill is not like what the QE is today. Buying mortgage-backed securities with the announcement Thursday, $40 billion a month forever, okay? In theory, forever. You see, he didn't put a date on it. If you ask yourself, what is the long-term interest rate in the last 50, call it 51 years, from 61 to date, long-term interest rates are 7.46%. That's the U.S. government bond. However, if you take away the capital appreciation, it's 7.02. So let's say it's 7%. That's what the long-term interest rate is. So when interest rates today, which are under 3, and you do a QE, you are exposing the taxpayer to risk, because bonds don't mature in 30 days, they mature in 30 years. 20 in some, anything over 10 is considered a bond. So what you are doing is exposing taxpayers to risk by using the same thesis as you were buying a Treasury bill to stimulate the economy, which has very little risk because it matures in 90 days. The risk, by the way, is 59%. If you go back to historical rates, whatever is on the Fed balance sheet today, which is $2.8 trillion, plus the $40 billion a month he's going to put in, that money that is basically on the balance sheet could lose, if you go back to historic over 30 years, the median compounded rate of what interest is on 30 years, you will go down 59%. So the Fed will lose today's balance sheet, $850 billion. That the taxpayer, that's part of the deficit. So that's the significance. The excuse is we're doing monetary policy, only we're making it longer. What they don't tell you is the risks to make this money look better to the, if you will, to business so that they will invest and hire people.
Hey, Kevin, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Can I just, I can't necessarily add to that particular statement, but I'm going to, my good friend Representative Ken Ivory quite frequently uses a quote from Erskine Bowles. He says that, and Erskine Bowles said that we were within 2 years, if I quote it right, 2 years within the most predictable economic crisis ever. A few months ago, Ben Bernanke, in one of his reports, said that, and I'll try to quote him, that the level of national debt is clearly unsustainable. And he says, although no one knows when a financial crisis will occur, it is ever so closer. And so I thought it was really interesting when we go back and talk now about the QE3, Erskine Bowles a few months ago was saying, you know, the level of debt is clearly unsustainable. And yet now he's coming back and saying, okay, we're going to add more money. We're going to basically, in reality, print more money and put more money into the market. And that's obviously a significant concern.
Our next speaker now is the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, Sheriff Richard Mack, and he will be introduced this morning by Utah State Representative Kurt Oda, who is a member of the Patrick Henry Caucus. Kurt, I saw him. There he is.
Thank you. I'm Representative Kurt Oda from Clearfield. You know, I've known our next speaker for many, many years, but at least a dozen years. And I'm, it's always been in the light of firearms issues. He's the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Richard was a sheriff of Graham County, Arizona, and that was at the time when the Brady Bill was signed. As all of you recall, Brady Bill was had to do with the Brady campaign, has to do with attacking our Second Amendment rights. And, you know, Brady was the President Reagan's, one of his staff members who was shot by kind of a deranged shooter. Anyway, Sheriff Mack filed a suit against the federal government on the Brady Act and won in the Supreme Court. That decision and the opinion which accompanied it said that the states are not subject to federal direction. He's a tireless proponent of the Constitution and of peace officers keeping their oath of office. Please help me in welcoming Sheriff Mack.
Thank you. We're still trying to see if my computer's going to get hooked up here. Wrong guy. All right. Yay, we're up. Hey. Wow, thank goodness. No. I would really like to thank, first of all of you for being here, and this is an honor to be here, and I'd like to thank Bert and Kathy, and also they were at our Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association convention just last January 30th, and we wanted to do another one. It was such a miracle that the first one went as well as it did that we decided to have one again on Constitution Day. So if you look down at your clocks and watches and calendars, that's this coming Monday. September 17th is Constitution Day, and I'm going to do something right now. There's several of you in this room that are going to attend this. I'm going to invite the rest of you right now. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say we have your room and board covered. All right? It's at the South Point Hotel in Las Vegas. If you don't know where the South Point is, it's just on I-15 as you're leaving town towards California. You're all welcome. Yeah, you're going to hear some great speakers. Bruce Clegg, County Commissioner here in Tooele. Ken Ivory. Are you sitting down? Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Maricopa County. Yes. Do you folks know, if you watch NBC, ABC, CBS, and even a little bit Fox News, you won't know that the biggest story in the world has happened because, first time in American history, a sheriff has conducted a criminal investigation on the President of the United States, okay? And Joe and I are pretty good friends, and we keep in touch. And we've talked before about, the birther thing or the birth certificate thing or blah, blah, blah. Before he was asked to actually conduct an investigation, and he didn't think it was an issue, and I didn't really think it was either. Until the Tea Party group in Phoenix asked him to conduct an investigation. They showed him some legitimate, probable cause for an investigation, and his response was, how could I say no to a legitimate investigation? What was I going to do? Tell my constituents, no, I don't do that. We don't do investigations at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We just, we're here, as Joe has mentioned many times, that he's the toughest sheriff in America because he is the one that went after the drug runners and the illegal aliens and the prostitutes and the street gangs and blah, blah, blah. And I said, Sheriff Joe, come on, we're friends. And I promise you, because we are friends, I won't sue you. But you're not the toughest sheriff in America. And he says, I guess you think you are. And I said, Joe, it's really elementary. You took on the drug runners, the illegal aliens, the prostitutes, and a lot of others, but I took on the Clintons. Yeah. And so he says you got me there, so he nicknamed me America's Sheriff, and he's still keeping the toughest sheriff. And I said, okay, that's our compromise. We'll go for that. But really, my dear friends and fellow Americans, the longer and the older I get, the longer I look back at what I did, the more miraculous it seems. A small town sheriff in southern Arizona sues the federal government, fights the Clinton administration. And yes, I am grateful to have lived to tell about it. But indeed, is that your sheriff's job, to fight the federal government? It's his job to keep his oath. That's what his job is. And if that's where that takes you, then so be it. But his job is to what? Uphold, defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution. If he can't keep his oath, then what good is the rest of what he does? Oh, you know, what excuses could we offer as sheriffs in this country and say, I won't protect your land from the federal government. I won't protect your lifestyle. I won't protect your business. I won't protect you and your family. They can come in and do whatever they want. Now, I don't see what great thing any sheriff could offer if they're saying that. And to whom do we owe the fulfillment of our oath? The people who hired us. And this is where the power of the sheriff really comes from. When you examine his office and you say, wow, the sheriff's job goes back over 1,000 years. He was the first cop in America. He has over 1,000 years traditionally and historically been the ultimate protector of the people. And he is the only elected by, for, and of the people protector or law enforcement officer in your county. You do not elect anyone else. He is not a bureaucrat. He does not answer to a bureaucrat. He answers to the President of the United States, right? No! The President of the United States cannot tell your sheriff what to do. And guess what, Mr. Bishop, are you still here? The United States Congress can't tell your sheriff what to do either. He is not subject to federal direction. He is the employee of the people of your county. Period. End of story. Does he answer to the county commission? No. He answers to you. Does he answer to the governor or state legislature? No. He answers to you. And that is a huge responsibility. Within that responsibility, he promised you in God's name that he would uphold, defend, and obey the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Utah. Therein lies his job. There's his job. You can show it to him. Here's your job. Here's your job. You promised to protect these. Oh, well, I don't have the authority to do that. Then why did you take an oath? If you swore an oath, do you keep it? Can you really be sovereign and not have people standing for state sovereignty? And can you really be sovereign and you don't own your land? Utah is 71% owned by the federal government. Arizona, where I'm from, 85%. Nevada, 87, maybe 90. People have said even 95. The county I was from, where I was sheriff in Graham County, Arizona, is 95. 95% owned by the federal government. How did we let that happen? Well, I think the answer, a lot of people have that. Ken Ivory probably has that answer better than I do. But I know it's wrong, and I know there's a solution, and I know we should be doing something about it. And state sovereignty has one purpose and one purpose only, and you can see this reiterated in the decision called Bond versus U.S. That state sovereignty's purpose is to protect individual sovereignty. State sovereignty isn't here to protect the geographical boundary of Utah. It's here to protect the individual God-given liberty of every American and every Utahn. State sovereignty is enforced by, who enforces state sovereignty? Who enforces the 10th Amendment? Who enforces states' rights? Who is here and who is lawfully here to guarantee state sovereignty? I know. You're all waiting for Barack Obama to pick the state sovereignty czar. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to think that probably that czar is not going to happen. But we have a bunch of others. And let's remember where the word czar comes from. Caesar. Mr. Obama, we don't have Caesars in America. okay? I know you're not the first one to use them, but I'm still telling you that. It's plain and simply the truth. We don't have them here, okay? Now, there's just a couple of things I want to show you here out of my case. First of all, why do we take the oath of office? The Founding Fathers required it itself in Article 6 of the Constitution, that every facet of our government, the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, all the officers in those three branches are required, both state, federal, local, all of us are required to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Do we keep that allegiance by telling citizens, hey, you're going to have to go get a lawyer? That's the only way that you can get your freedom guaranteed is by get a lawyer. What if you can't afford a lawyer? Then you're out of luck, aren't you? And how about local officials making sure you don't need a lawyer? That there's actually somebody in your county standing up for you and your rights. Okay? Madison said the answer was in the theory and doctrine of interposition. Look at the word he uses in the Virginia resolution that he wrote. That we should depend on local officials to interpose on our behalf. Who better when the last line of defense is your county sheriff? I'd love to see governors and legislatures and legislators working with sheriffs to erect the barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. The very thing that Madison warned us about, that we can safely rely on our states to erect the barriers. Look at this. This came right from my Supreme Court case. And by the way, this little booklet has the highlights of my case. And you can get those at my book signing table out there. This case was so amazing when it came to states' rights and the 10th Amendment that it's been called the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in American history. And this is one of the reasons why here. Look at this. We have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction. Do some of them need to read that? I would say so. The worst thing that we have going on in this country is the corrupt practice of federal grants going to the states and counties. It is corrupt, it is wrong, and it is a misuse of citizen money. The taxpayer money was never intended to be used in such a bribe fashion. Do not take that money. It's not theirs to give. Okay, right here. Scalia, in writing this decision, shows us the solution. But you know what? Solutions aren't any good written down, are they? They take people to act upon them. Look at this. The separation of the two spheres he's talking about, do you know what two spheres he's talking about? I know you do. The two spheres he's talking about is the dual sovereignty that we were talking about earlier, okay? The federal sphere, which is about as big as my fist, and the state sphere, which is as big as this room, okay? Are one of the Constitution's structural protections of liberty. State sovereignty, my dear friends, is a constitutional structural protection of liberty. Who's going to enforce that? Who's going to uphold and defend that? Okay? Keep going, and it compares state sovereignty to a fourth branch of government. Just as the other branches of government serve to protect us, so does state sovereignty. And then go down to gold at the end. Here he comes with the solution, and it's kind of on the lap of everybody in this room, especially governors, state reps, sheriffs, county commissioners, and sheriffs, and city council, and county commissioners. And did I say sheriffs? Okay, good. A healthy balance of power. What? What is the solution? A healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. My dear friends, can I ask you a question now? Do we have that healthy balance of power today? That's almost a joke, isn't it? Well, in this decision, Scalia quotes another, one of the judges in the history of our jurisprudence, and he says this, "But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions." It's in this decision. Two small-town sheriffs go all the way to the United States Supreme Court in order to keep their oaths, sue the federal government, sue the Clinton administration, beat them, and we have this today. And this is only effective and it only helps if we have the courage to uphold and defend, protect and preserve our United States Constitution. We're not in trouble today because we follow the Constitution too strictly. Far from it. Here's the solution. It's in the Constitution, it's in the 10th Amendment, it's in our hearts, and it now must be part of the courage that we implement as local officials. I know my time is up. Back when I was a cop, I want to close in the same way that I always close. If you'll bear with me just one more minute. When I was a cop in Provo, I was converted to the U.S. Constitution. I actually attended a seminar as I was studying the office and studying why we have government. I went to a seminar with 240 other cops from the state of Utah right here on this campus, and the instructor's name was Dr. W. Cleon Skousen. He used to work in the FBI with my father, and he taught a class for law enforcement called The Making of America. We didn't study how to drive cars faster or how to shoot guns better or how to put handcuffs on people better. We studied the Constitution in 16 hours of police training. I share with you now what he taught all of us, big, tough 240 cops from the state of Utah. He taught us all this, and he made us all stand up, and he taught us this. And at the end of it, he gave me his book, The Making of America, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Promise me that you'll teach these things to your children." I have kept that promise. And now I teach them all across the country. And I leave with you now the same thing that he taught me that day, a little kindergarten exercise that I've nicknamed America's Political Prayer. Remember, I learned this at police training. And this political prayer goes like this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And that's the eagle. Long may she be free. Thank you.